Welcome to Camden Town, one of the most vibrant and eclectic areas of London. We're beginning our walk here in front of Camden Town Station, and we'll end up in a very unusual store indeed. But first, what's in a name? Camden Town is named after Sir Charles Pratt, the first Earl Camden who lived in the 18th century. Camden was styled after his estate, called Camden Place, near Chislehurst in Kent. In the 18th century, a manor stood on these lands as part of Kentish Town, and Pratt acquired it by marrying Elizabeth Jeffreys. Now bear with me here because I'm going to be throwing a lot of names at you, but it'll make sense in the end. Elizabeth Jeffreys was the daughter of Nicholas Jeffreys, who was the son and heir of Sir Geoffrey Jeffreys of Brecknock. If you can believe it, Geoffrey Jeffreys. Also, Sir Charles Pratt's second title was Viscount Bayham, and all these names, Pratt, Jeffreys, Brecknock and Bayham, can still be found in Camden streets. The reason we have Camden as we see it today and not one massive manor with lots of land is because in 1791 Sir Charles Pratt started granting leases for 1,400 houses to be built around the manor, and so a community began to rise. The World's End is an award-winning pub and unusually large for London. There's capacity for 1,000 people and also space for 500 in its iconic underworld music venue underneath. But what I find most interesting about this site is not this pub, but one which was here before it. Mother Redcap was more a halfway house than a pub. A halfway house was a place where people with physical and mental disabilities, and also those with a criminal background, could learn skills to integrate into society. This halfway house relied a lot on travellers who would briefly stop to rest, eat, or stay while on a journey. While most halfway houses were not the most reputable of places to stay and tended to be mainly an affordable option, Mother Redcap was particularly infamous as a place of terror for travellers. Mr. J.T. Smith in his book For a Rainy Day says that Mother Redcap was a real person, the Mother Damnable of Kentish Town, and it was her house where the notorious Moll Cutpurse, the highwaywoman of Oliver Cromwell's days, dismounted and frequently lodged. There's a lot of doubt on the real history of the Mother Redcap figure, but supposedly she was a woman by the name of Ginny with a rather troubled family life. Her partner was apparently tried at the Old Bailey and hung for stealing a sheep. She was then associated with a man called Darby, who was a drunk, and Darby mysteriously went missing one day. Then her parents were taken before the magistrates for practicing black magic and were hung. Ginny was then associated with a man called Pitcher, who turned up dead, burnt to a cinder crouched in an oven. She was tried for the murder, but was acquitted because one of her associates somehow proved Pitcher had often gone into the oven to hide from her. Apparently they argued quite a lot. Ginny became the black sheep of the town, not surprisingly. She was a lone woman who was very sharp to anyone who spoke to her, and was blamed for anything that went wrong in the area. She was even accused of being a witch, and it probably didn't help that her parents were hung accused of the same. Ginny would often lean out of her hatch door, yelling at the mobs with a red cap on her head. And when her black cat jumped up beside her, the mob would then retreat. It's kind of a double foe. You couldn't really be much more of a witchy stereotype than that. When she died, hundreds of locals said that they witnessed the devil entering her house the day before. And as she was found sitting upright, it said that the undertaker had to break her limbs before he could actually place her in the coffin. A very unfortunate but interesting history of Mother Redcap. Now let's head to Bayham Street, just around the corner. Charles Dickens was an English author and social critic who had quite an idyllic childhood, spending lots of time outdoors and reading. Around the age of 11, his father, a clerk in the Navy Pay Office, was recalled to the headquarters at Somerset House, and the Dickens family relocated to Camden, in fact here, on Bayham Street, in 1822. He considered it about the poorest part of the London suburbs. The house itself was very small, and as one of 8 children, I'm sure it definitely felt that way. It had a tiny, unkempt garden, nothing like the outdoorsy scenes that Dickens was used to. He struggled to make friends and find himself at home here, despite eventually spending a number of years in Camden, including living at Little College Street, now 112 College Place, and attending the Wellington House Academy. He didn't consider the school very good either, and the terrible atmosphere was given life in his novel David Copperfield. If you'd like to find out more about Charles Dickens, there's a Charles Dickens Museum at 48 Doughty Street in Holborn. And Holborn is still in the London Borough of Camden, but it is about a 40-minute walk from here, so it's not on this immediate tour. But I do recommend it, as the Georgian House is Dickens' only surviving London home. All his other homes here in Camden Town no longer exist, including the one on Bayham Street. Right, let's start walking up the High Street, shall we? You can't talk about Camden without talking about its punk rock relevancy, because it's still alive and well here in the town. Up until the mid-20th century, Camden was considered highly unfashionable and was not a favourite with Londoners. A couple decades later, and the punks had taken over, with 1976 being basically the start of the punk rock era. You can't walk more than a block of the road without finding a music venue, including here at the famous Electric Ballroom. Now a grungy rock and roll performance venue that has seen the likes of Blur, Rolling Stones, Red Hot Chili Peppers and the Smiths through its doors. It started out as an Irish ballroom owned by Bill Fuller since 1938. In the 1970s, big names like Paul McCartney and Led Zeppelin began using it as a rehearsal studio. And the ballroom relaunched as a rock venue in 1978. In the 1990s, the ballroom's popularity truly took off, particularly its Friday night goth disco, which sounds like an oxymoron, but there you go. The Electric Ballroom is just one of a number of clubs, bars and music halls in the area that give this place a unique vibe. There's Dingwall's Dance Hall, the Roundhouse, Coco, the Underworld, Dublin Castle, just to name a few of the many amazing places to hear music. Regent's Canal features in many photos about Camden because this is the site of the rather beautiful Camden Lock. If you're lucky enough to be here as the boat is going through, it's worth hanging around to watch. As you can see, the river is at different heights here. Boats at the top make sure that this intersection is full of water and open the lock on this side to enter, then closes it behind them. The water in here then lowers and the boat goes with it until it's at the height of the river down there at the end. And then the boat can open the second lock and sail out. Camden Lock is a double lock. As you can see, there's another section over there. The reason that there are two is down to the importance of water saving. The engineers knew that water supply could be a real problem. Regent's Canal was built through the area between 1816 and 1820. It starts at Little Venice and ends not far from here. It's named after the Prince Regent, who later became King George IV. If you ever fancy it, it's really nice to walk along it, either starting here to Little Venice or vice versa. Or you can take a number of narrowboats that sell tickets to the public. It's about a 45-minute to an hour's trip. If you want to be even closer to the water, I've heard that there are kayak tours as well, though that does not sound at all appealing in winter. It's not far to our next stop. It's just over there, at West Yard. Once the site of a timber yard, West Yard is an international food mecca here in London. There are over 30 food stalls serving anything from Colombian street food to Turkish delicacies to American to Mexican, and you can get both sweet and savoury to suit your taste buds. The food stalls even extend further into the stables if this isn't quite enough for you. These stalls used to be a bit more haphazard and temporary. That's the way I remember them whenever I came to visit growing up. But not too long ago, these purpose-built food stalls were put in place. So essentially, whenever you come here, whatever time of year, even on days as cold as it is today, you'll be able to find something really yummy to eat. A little tip, they do like to give out free samples at most of these stalls to entice you in. So as long as there isn't a massive line of people, you could be in luck to have a taste of cuisines from around the world as you move between the stalls. If that doesn't quite fill you up, then choose your favourite and get a meal. Let's go grab something, then head over to the Hitch Gin micro distillery. Camden has had a glorious gin history, and the late 1800s saw Camden Lock at the centre of the industry, with many of the warehouses here being involved in making some of the world's finest gin and distributing it around the globe on its very own personal gin express railway. Now, doesn't that sound appealing to any gin lovers out there? The warehouses do remain, but the gin scene sadly disappeared, as did the railway, and many of those buildings have been repurposed into, well, Camden Market as you see it today. What's left of that heritage is summed up nicely in the Hitch Gin micro distillery, where gin is distilled in a copper pot named Smithy. If you head inside, you can see the spirit being distilled and grab a free taster, and also buy a bottle for yourself. If you're in London long enough as a visitor, or if you're looking for new things to do as a local, they also host a gin school with bespoke gin making classes, and you can take your very own spirit home, which you made with anything. That's what they say, at least. Any ingredients you choose to bring with you, including Percy Pig sweets apparently. Seems a bit balmy. Off to the stables. Perhaps you're wondering what horses have to do with Camden. Well, I'll tell you. In the early 20th century, this was a hive of industrial activity as goods came in and out from all over the British Empire. Horses were required to pull boats and floating platforms along Regent's Canal, with all kinds of train parts and goods going towards King's Cross rail station and to various storage yards around the area. And the horses needed to be kept somewhere. Here. These stables were occupied by animals and artisan saddlers. Not only that, but there was also a horse hospital here, where exhausted horses were treated and could rest. This is also the site of the Camden Catacombs. They're not true catacombs as such, but basically there's an underground area here beneath the markets, where there were additional stables for the horses and ponies. If that's your kind of thing, then sorry to disappoint you, but they're not actually open to visitors. There's a danger of flooding in this area. But the stables themselves are a fantastic place if you want to come and find a little treasure, some bespoke items, antiques, souvenirs, records, jewellery, fashion, almost anything you can think of. It's an amazing place, and it's amazing that it looks as good as it does. In 1980 and 2008, there were major fire outbreaks, and both wiped out a significant amount of the market each time. As you can see, everything is really close here, as is the London Way, so these kinds of things get exacerbated very quickly. But it seems that no matter what hits it, it can't knock Camden's spirit. I know a lot of Amy Winehouse fans, and if you're a music lover that happens to find yourself here in Camden Town, then a pilgrimage to her statue wouldn't go amiss. Winehouse used to live in Camden Town, first on Prowse Place and then on Camden Square, where she was tragically found dead in 2011. This area was what her father called her playground. She used to drink at the Hawley Arms pub and played in gigs in many of the Camden venues. This bronze statue was erected in her honour in the Stables Market and is very much in keeping with her style, with her signature beehive. It's quite unusual for the statue to even have been created yet, as London councils usually accept submissions for sculptures when it's been at least 20 years since the person's death, and this was created and set here just 3 years after Winehouse died. It was created by British sculptor Scott Eaton, who won the commission after showing his ideas to Winehouse's father. It was supposed to be placed at the iconic Roundhouse venue, but was instead put here so that far more people could access it. It was unveiled in 2014 on what would have been her 31st birthday. Our last stop on this tour is a very unique store indeed, just around the corner. Cyberdog. What began as a small stall in 1994 in Camden Market has grown into the rather striking storefront you see behind me. And what's inside is absolutely mental. The building itself was once part of the whole warehouse district in Camden. Between 1976 and 79, it was used by the punk band The Clash as their residence and rehearsal area. But now it's the home of Cyberdog. They sell rave gear that fit into categories like neon clubwear and cybertronic. Rather than your traditional mannequins, their clothing is hung from static cyborgs, and they have dancers raving it up throughout the day to the club music that they constantly boom out of their doors. It's the brainchild of Terry Davey and Spiros Vlahos, and the name came from their pet Chihuahua, who they named Chi-Chi the Cyberdog. This store is usually very busy with a lot of people. It's just popular even with people who would never buy or wear anything inside in a million years. It's just too fascinating to miss, so I highly recommend going inside, even if only for a look around. The thing is though, you can't take photos or film while inside, so this part of the tour is going to have to remain something of a mystery and a surprise until you physically go here. Enjoy yourself!